My name is Hilda, and at 34 years old, I finally achieved my dream of owning a beach house in coastal Maine. 8 years of saving every penny working weekends and sacrificing vacations made it possible. So, imagine my shock when I discovered my cousin had sent 150 wedding invitations listing my address as the venue without even mentioning it to me. The worst part, they kept referring to it as our family beach house on their wedding website. Before I tell you how I turned this wedding disaster into the sweetest revenge, drop a comment where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had family take advantage of your generosity. I grew up in a small inland town in Maine called Millfield, about 70 miles from the coast. My family lived modestly in a 3-bedroom ranch-style house that my father, a high school teacher, and my mother, a part-time librarian, struggled to maintain. Every summer, we would take a single-day trip to the beach, and those precious hours by the ocean became the highlight of my entire year. When I was 12, I announced at our family dinner table that someday I would live in a house where I could see the ocean from my window. My older brother laughed. My father gently explained how expensive coastal property was, and my mother patted my hand with a sympathetic smile. My Aunt Diana, who happened to be visiting that night, was less kind. "Dream smaller, Hilda," she said. "People like us do not end up in beach houses." That comment lit a fire in me. From that day forward, my dream became my obsession. In high school, I worked after classes at the local diner, saving every tip. While my friends spent their summers lounging by the community pool, I took on babysitting jobs and lawn mowing gigs. By the time I graduated, I had saved enough for community college, where I studied business with a focus on real estate. At 22, fresh out of college, I landed a job as an assistant at Coastal Horizons, a prestigious real estate firm in Portland. The position paid barely above minimum wage, but it gave me something more valuable than money exposure. I absorbed everything about the coastal real estate market, studying properties during lunch breaks, accompanying agents on showings whenever allowed, and volunteering to host open houses that more senior brokers avoided. While my peers rented nice apartments and bought new cars, I lived in a tiny studio apartment with secondhand furniture and drove a 15-year-old Honda with nearly 200,000 miles on it. Every month, I would transfer 30% of my paycheck into a special savings account I named Beach House Dream. By 26, I had earned my broker license and started building my own client portfolio. I discovered I had a talent for matching people with their dream homes, perhaps because I understood so deeply what it meant to yearn for a special place. By 28, I was the top-performing broker at Coastal Horizons, yet my lifestyle remained modest. My friends and family began questioning my frugality, suggesting I live a little. But I kept my eyes on the prize. The search for my perfect beach house began in earnest when I turned 30. Over the next 2 years, I visited 47 properties. Some were too large and expensive, others too run down, and many lacked that special connection I was waiting to feel. Then on a rainy Tuesday in April, I toured a property that had just been listed that morning. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. It was a 3-bedroom cottage situated on a small private stretch of beach about 20 miles north of Portland. The structure needed work, but it had bones, solid oak floors, throughout a wraparound porch facing the water and floor-to-ceiling windows, in the main living area that framed the Atlantic like a living painting. The master bedroom had a small balcony, where I imagined drinking coffee while watching the sunrise over the water. The bidding war was fierce. 4 other offers came in, all above asking price. I stretched myself to the absolute limit of what my savings and approved mortgage would allow, writing a personal letter to the owners explaining my decade-long dream. When my agent called to tell me my offer had been accepted, I sat on the floor of my studio apartment and cried for an hour. The renovation process was another labor of love. To save money, I did much of the work myself, learning from YouTube videos and guidance from contractor clients who took pity on my ambitious DIY approach. I spent every weekend and evening at the house for 6 months, painting walls, refinishing cabinets, and learning to repair the weathered portions of the deck. My hands were perpetually covered in blisters and splinters, but every ache felt like progress. I will never forget my first night in the completed house. It was October, and a storm was rolling in from the ocean. I sat on my porch, swing with a blanket and a mug of tea, watching lightning illuminate the waves. In that moment, every sacrifice, every extra client, every skipped vacation, and passed up dinner invitation felt absolutely worth it. This was mine, all mine. From the beginning, I established clear boundaries with my family regarding the beach house. I invited them for occasional weekend visits and hosted 2 family Thanksgiving dinners, but I always made it clear that visits needed to be planned and approved in advance. Most relatives respected this arrangement, expressing genuine happiness for my achievement, but a few particularly, my Aunt Diana and her immediate family seemed to have difficulty with the concept. During one of those early family gatherings, I overheard Diana telling my cousin Madeline we should plan a summer reunion at our beach house. The possessive pronoun made my skin crawl, but I gently corrected her later, reminding her that while I was happy to host occasional family events, the house was my personal residence and primary investment. She laughed it off as a simple slip of the tongue, but I noticed the our and we language continued whenever my property was mentioned. Looking back now, I realize I should have been more direct in addressing these early warning signs. But growing up in a family where conflict was avoided at all costs, I found it difficult to be confrontational, especially with older relatives. Instead, I tried to establish boundaries through actions rather than words, limiting invitations and being strategically unavailable during prime summer months when requests to use the family beach house seemed to multiply. Little did I know that my failure to directly confront these entitlement issues would eventually lead to the wedding invitation disaster that would force me to take a much more dramatic stand. My cousin Madeline is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were never particularly close, separated by both age and temperament. Where I was practical and goal-oriented, Madeline was spontaneous and social. While I saved for college, she traveled through Europe after high school, her adventures funded by her parents, my Aunt Diana and Uncle Robert. Diana, my mother's younger sister, has always lived with a sense of dissatisfaction about her place in life. Though she and my Uncle Robert lived comfortably in a 4-bedroom colonial in a nice suburb, Diana constantly compared herself to friends with vacation homes or newer cars. This tendency toward comparison eventually extended to me once my real estate career took off. Comments like, well, not all of us can be making commission on million-dollar homes became common whenever my success was mentioned at family gatherings. The first significant tension regarding my beach house occurred during the summer following my completion of renovations. Diana called to inform me, not ask me, that she had invited her bridge club for a beach weekend at our cottage. When I explained that I had clients scheduled for showings that weekend and would not be able to host her, response was telling, "You do not need to be there, Hilda. We can take care of ourselves." I was so stunned by her presumption that it took me a moment to find my voice. Diana, this is not a family timeshare. This is my home. I am not comfortable having guests when I am not present. The silence on the other end of the line was frigid. "I see success has made you selfish," she finally said. "Your grandfather would be disappointed by how you have changed." That invocation of my beloved grandfather, who had passed away years before I could achieve my dream, was a manipulative tactic that left me speechless. After that conversation, Diana maintained a cool distance at family events, often making passive-aggressive comments about people who forget where they came from. Despite these tensions, I continued to host occasional family gatherings, including Madeline's 29th birthday celebration, just 8 months before the wedding invitation incident. It was during this party that I first met her boyfriend, now fiancé Tyler. He seemed pleasant enough, if somewhat passive, particularly around his future mother-in-law. I noticed how Diana dominated their conversation, speaking for both Madeline and Tyler when topics like their apartment hunting came up. "They will find something suitable once Tyler gets a proper promotion," Diana declared, though neither Madeline nor Tyler had mentioned any career dissatisfaction. "Of course, nothing compares to having a place like this. We are so fortunate to have this beach house in the family." There it was again, the subtle claim of communal ownership. I caught Madeline's eye across the room, expecting perhaps a look of embarrassment at her mother's presumption, but instead she nodded in agreement. "We are so lucky," she echoed, gesturing around my living room. "This place is perfect for gatherings." About 4 months before the wedding invitation incident, I noticed an uptick in communication from Diana and Madeline. Casual texts asking about my schedule, comments on my social media posts of sunrise views from my deck, and even a coffee invitation from Diana, something that had never happened before. In retrospect, I should have recognized this sudden interest as suspicious, but I naively interpreted it as a warming of our relationship. During that coffee meeting, Diana mentioned that Madeline and Tyler were having venue issues for their upcoming wedding. The place they put a deposit on double-booked the date, she explained, stirring her latte vigorously. They are absolutely devastated. I made sympathetic noises, but deliberately avoided offering my home as a solution. Something about Diana's expectant expression made me wary. When she added, "They really had their hearts set on an oceanside ceremony," I changed the subject, asking about my cousin Ben's new job instead. The conversation left me feeling manipulated, though I could not quite articulate why. That evening, I called my best friend Jessica to discuss the encounter. "She was fishing for an invitation," Jessica said immediately. "And when you did not bite, she probably decided to take matters into her own hands." "But nobody would actually plan a wedding at someone else's house without permission," I protested. "That would be insane." Jessica's laugh was cynical. "You underestimate what entitled people will do, especially family. They do not see it as your house in their minds. Trust me, I have dealt with this in my own family." I dismissed her concerns as overly dramatic, but our conversation left me unsettled enough that I began declining family calls more frequently, using work as an excuse. Perhaps some part of me sensed what was brewing and wanted to avoid the confrontation I knew would be inevitable if Diana directly asked to use my home for the wedding. This pattern of avoidance reflected a deeper issue in my relationship with my extended family. Despite my outward success, I still struggled with standing firm against the emotional manipulations that had been effective throughout my childhood. It was easier to make myself unavailable than to directly say no, and weather the guilt trips, accusations of selfishness, and invocations of family obligation that would surely follow. What I failed to realize was that my avoidance would not prevent the coming conflict, but merely postpone it until the stakes were significantly higher for everyone involved. It was an ordinary Tuesday in June, just over 2 months before Madeline's wedding date, when my phone rang while I was preparing documents for a closing scheduled later that afternoon. I did not recognize the number but answered anyway, as unknown calls often turned out to be potential clients. "Hello, Miss Lambert. This is Patricia from Coastal Catering. I wanted to confirm the final headcount for the Sanders wedding at your property on August 19th. We need to finalize staff requirements." For a moment, I thought she had the wrong number. "I am sorry, there must be some mistake. There is no wedding scheduled at my property." The catering manager sounded confused. "This is the Lambert residence at 46 Lighthouse Point Road, correct?" An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. "Yes, that is my address, but I have not authorized any wedding to take place there." "Oh, I am so sorry," Patricia said, sounding genuinely flustered. "I was given your contact information by the mother of the bride for final venue details. The wedding website lists your property as the venue." I felt like I had been doused with ice water. "Could you tell me the name of the bride?" "Madeline Sanders. She is marrying Tyler Brooks on August 19th. The invitations have already gone out to 150 guests, listing your address." After ending the call with the caterer, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, trying to process what I had just learned. Surely there had been some misunderstanding. No one would actually send out wedding invitations using someone else's property as the venue without explicit permission. But the sinking feeling in my chest told me this was exactly what had happened. With trembling hands, I began making calls to other wedding vendors in the area. Within an hour, I had spoken with a florist, a rental company, and a wedding photographer, all of whom confirmed they had been booked for a wedding at my address on August 19th. The rental company was particularly illuminating. Yes, Mrs. Sanders specified we would need seating for 150 on the beach for the ceremony, and then reception seating on the lawn and porch. She provided a detailed property layout. Next, I searched online for Madeline Sanders' Tyler Brooks wedding. Their wedding website appeared immediately, featuring multiple photos of my house and property with the heading, "Our Celebration by the Sea." The site included detailed directions to my address and accommodation suggestions for out-of-town guests, recommending hotels in the area since the beach house will be reserved for immediate family and wedding party. I scrolled through the site with growing disbelief, stopping at a section titled, "Our Story." It included a paragraph that made my blood boil. "We are blessed to be celebrating our special day at our family beach house. a place that has been part of our most treasured memories. The Sanders family beach house has been a gathering place for generations, and we cannot imagine a more perfect setting to begin our life together. My beach house had been in my possession for less than 3 years, and Madeline had visited exactly twice. With shaking hands, I navigated to Madeline's social media accounts. There it was in black and white, multiple posts about our family beach house and the perfect wedding venue, some with photos of my property taken during her birthday celebration. One post from 2 months earlier showed her and Tyler on my porch with the caption, "Site visit for the big day. Cannot wait to say I do with the ocean as our witness at our family's beautiful beach house." I was still reeling from these discoveries when my mail arrived. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a cream-colored envelope with elegant calligraphy. Inside was a wedding invitation identical to the 150 others already sent out, inviting me to celebrate the union of Madeline and Tyler at the Sanders family beach house. I had just placed the invitation on my counter when my phone rang. It was Madeline. "Hilda, I was just calling to make sure you got your invitation. I sent it a little late since you already know all the details." Her voice was cheerful, as if this conversation was completely normal. "Madeline," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level, "why am I just now learning that you are planning to have your wedding at my house?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, did Mom not talk to you about it? She said she would handle all the details with you." "No one has spoken to me about hosting a wedding at my house. Not you, not Diana, not anyone." But Madeline sounded genuinely confused, Mom. Said it was all arranged months ago. She said you were thrilled to host the wedding as your gift to us. My anger shifted targets immediately. "Let me call you back," I said, ending the call before she could respond. I dialed Diana's number, my hands still shaking with a combination of shock and rage. She answered on the third ring, her voice falsely bright. "Hilda, darling, I was just thinking about you. Did you get Madeline's invitation?" "Diana," I cut in, "why are there 150 people expecting to attend a wedding at my house in 2 months? And why am I just learning about this now?" There was a brief silence before she responded in a dismissive tone. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Hilda. We discussed this months ago. You knew we were having difficulty with venues." "We never discussed using my house as a wedding venue. You mentioned venue problems, but I never offered my home." "Well, I assumed it was understood. We are family, we share things. That is what families do." Her casual tone pushed me over the edge. "No, Diana, families do not send out wedding invitations using someone else's property as the venue without explicit permission. This is completely inappropriate and absolutely presumptuous. After all we have done for you growing up." Diana's voice took on the injured tone I had heard so many times before. "All those years your mother and I helped you with school projects, all the family support when you were struggling to get your business started. This is how you repay that. By denying Madeline her perfect wedding?" I was momentarily stunned by this revisionist history. My aunt had done very little to support my career, and any childhood help had been the normal actions of family, not deposits in some favor bank to be withdrawn decades later. "This is not about repaying anything," I said firmly. "This is about basic respect for my property and boundaries." "You have become so selfish since buying that house," Diana said, her voice cold. "Success has changed you, and not for the better. I told your mother this would happen." Before I could respond, she continued. "The invitations are already sent. Deposits have been paid to vendors. Unless you plan to ruin Madeline's special day and embarrass the entire family, you will need to accept that this is happening." After ending the call with Diana, I barely had time to process my thoughts before my phone began ringing continuously. First came calls from my mother, then my brother, then various aunts and uncles. The family grapevine had apparently exploded with news of my selfish refusal to host the wedding that everyone had already been invited to. My cousin Ben, usually the most reasonable family member, called with a carefully diplomatic approach. "I know this is not ideal, Hilda, but could you consider going along with it just to keep the peace? The family is in an uproar and Madeline is in tears." By early evening, I was emotionally exhausted from defending myself in conversation after conversation. I finally turned off my phone and collapsed on my couch, breaking down in tears of frustration and betrayal. The beach house I had worked so hard to attain my sanctuary and achievement had been co-opted without my permission, and somehow I was being cast as the villain for objecting. Around 8 p.m., I finally called Jessica, the only person I trusted, to give me honest advice without family bias. "They did what?" Jessica exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That is not just crossing a boundary, that is bulldozing right through it with a marching band and fireworks display." "Everyone is making me feel like I am being unreasonable," I said, wiping away tears. "Am I overreacting?" "Absolutely not," Jessica said firmly. "They sent out invitations using your private property as a venue without asking you. That is beyond presumptuous. It is actually delusional. The fact that they are trying to make you feel guilty shows how deeply entitled they are to your space." Her validation released a fresh wave of tears, but these felt different, almost cleansing. For the first time since discovering the invitations, I felt certain that I was not the one in the wrong. "So what do I do now?" I asked. "If I refuse to host the wedding, I will be branded as the family villain forever. If I give in, I am essentially telling them that my boundaries do not matter and my property is communal." Jessica was quiet for a moment. "This might require a creative solution," she said finally. "Something that teaches them a lesson while not completely destroying your cousin's wedding day." As we talked late into the night, the seed of a plan began to form in my mind. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversations with the vendors Madeline, Diana, and the various family members who had called to pressure me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wedding website with its claims about our family beach house and remembered the invitations already in the hands of 150 guests. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made a cup of tea, taking it out to my porch where I could listen to the waves. The sound had always soothed me, but that night it offered little comfort. My sanctuary, the place I had sacrificed so much to obtain, no longer felt entirely mine. It had been claimed by family members who had done nothing to earn it, but felt entitled to it nonetheless. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, memories from childhood floated through my mind. I remembered Diana's dismissive "People like us do not end up in beach houses" comment, the way my dreams had been treated as childish fantasies rather than achievable goals. I recalled how, during my years of saving and working extra hours, certain family members had suggested I was being obsessive or missing out on life. When I finally achieved my dream, there had been congratulations, of course, but also undercurrents of envy and immediate assumptions about access. "Now we can have family beach vacations every summer," my Uncle Robert had declared at my housewarming, as if my property had automatically become a family timeshare. The depth of my hurt surprised me. This was not just about a wedding venue. It was about a lifetime of having my boundaries pushed and my achievements diminished. By sending out those invitations without my permission, Diana and Madeline had made it clear that they did not truly believe the beach house was mine. In their minds, it belonged to the family, and I was merely its caretaker. I pulled out my phone and began calculating numbers. Based on my knowledge of the wedding venue market in coastal Maine, a property like mine would rent for between $7,000 and $10,000 for a wedding weekend, depending on the season. That did not include the staff required for setup, security, cleaning, and coordination, which would add at least another $3,000. Insurance riders for events of this size would be another $500 minimum. By planning their wedding at our family beach house, Madeline and Tyler, or more likely Diana and Robert, were avoiding costs of at least $15,000. Yet they had not even had the courtesy to ask me if I was willing to provide this extremely valuable gift. Around 6 a.m., I called my friend Lauren, an attorney who specialized in property law, knowing she was an early riser who would be up for her morning run. "They have absolutely no right to use your property without permission," she confirmed after hearing the situation. "You could send cease and desist letters to all the vendors and formally revoke any permission they are claiming to have. Legally, you would be completely within your rights to deny access to your property on the wedding day." "But would that make me the bad guy?" I asked, voicing my central concern. Lauren sighed. "Legally right and socially accepted are different things, especially with family. You would be within your rights, but yes, in many people's eyes, including your family's, you would be seen as the villain who ruined a wedding." After ending the call with Lauren, I walked down to the beach as the sun rose fully over the horizon. The tide was going out, leaving the wet sand firm under my feet. I tried to imagine my cousin in her wedding dress standing at the water's edge, surrounded by guests on the beach that I had dreamed of for so long. The image brought conflicting emotions: anger at the presumption, but also a reluctance to be responsible for dashing her wedding dreams, regardless of how inappropriately those dreams had been planned. If I simply refused to allow the wedding, I would be cast as the villain, and the family rift would likely be permanent. If I acquiesced and allowed the wedding to proceed as planned, I would be establishing a precedent that my boundaries could be ignored and my property treated as communal. There had to be a third option, one that would allow the wedding to take place, while also firmly establishing that this was my property, not our family beach house. As I walked, my earlier conversation with Jessica about a creative solution kept replaying in my mind. What if I treated this exactly as what it should have been from the beginning? A business transaction. What if, instead of either refusing outright or giving in completely, I established that use of my property came with a formal arrangement and appropriate compensation? The idea took hold as I watched the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and pink. This solution would allow the wedding to proceed, sparing Madeline and her guests the chaos of a last-minute venue change. But it would also make it crystal clear that this was not our family beach house, but rather my private property being rented for their event. By the time I walked back to the house, my mind was made up. I would not be giving a free wedding venue as an unasked-for gift, nor would I be canceling the event entirely. Instead, I would be teaching my family a lesson about respect, boundaries, and the true ownership of the beach house I had worked so hard to obtain. As I showered and dressed for the day, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose, replacing the hurt and confusion of the previous day. For the first time in my life, I was choosing to address a family boundary violation directly, rather than accommodating it to keep the peace. The prospect was terrifying, but also strangely liberating. I knew there would be consequences for the path I was choosing. Family relationships would be strained, possibly permanently altered. But as I looked around at the home I had sacrificed so much to create, I realized some things were worth standing up for, even at the cost of familial harmony. With newfound determination, I picked up my phone and made the first of many calls that would set my plan in motion. My first call that morning was to Coastal Premier Properties, a luxury rental agency that specialized in high-end vacation rentals and event venues along the Maine coast. I had worked with their owner, Martha Wilson, on several real estate transactions over the years and respected her business acumen and discretion. "Hilda, what a pleasant surprise," Martha greeted me warmly. "Are you finally ready to let us handle some short-term rentals for your beautiful beach house? We have had numerous inquiries." "Something like that," I replied, "but with a rather unique situation. Do you have time to meet today? I would prefer to discuss this in person." 3 hours later, I was sitting in Martha's elegantly appointed office with a view of Portland Harbor, explaining my family wedding dilemma. To her credit, Martha maintained a professional expression throughout my story, though her eyebrows rose notably when I mentioned the invitations had already been sent without my knowledge. So I concluded, rather than canceling the whole event and creating a family crisis, I would like to officially rent my property through your agency for this wedding, with all the proper contracts, insurance, staffing, and of course fees that would normally apply. Martha nodded slowly. "I understand completely, and I think it is a brilliant solution. They get their wedding venue, and you establish clear boundaries about your property." She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. "Given the short notice and peak summer season, this would typically be a premium rate booking. I want everything handled exactly as it would be for any other client," I said firmly. "Standard contracts, security deposits, property protection, clauses, the works. And I want your staff present throughout the event to ensure my home is treated with respect." For the next 2 hours, Martha and I worked out the details. Given the desirability of my property and the prime August date, the rental fee was set at $9,000 for the weekend plus a $2,000 security deposit. This would include basic staffing for the event, but the wedding party would be responsible for arranging and paying for additional vendors like catering, photography, and flowers. Martha drafted a comprehensive contract that included specific rules about property usage, noise limitations, parking restrictions, and cleanup requirements. We also included a clause requiring event insurance to be purchased by the wedding party, protecting my property from any potential damage claims. Normally, we would do a walkthrough with the clients before finalizing everything Martha noted. But given the circumstances, I suggest we proceed with the contract and present it to them as the only option if they wish to use your property. Exactly, I agreed. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms for using my property, take it or leave it. With the main contract in place, my next step was contacting the vendors who had been booked under the assumption that they would be working at a family property with no formal venue agreements. I started with Patricia from Coastal Catering. I wanted to inform you that there has been a change in the arrangements for the Sanders-Brooks wedding, I explained. My property will be professionally managed for the event by Coastal Premier Properties. All vendor contracts and arrangements should go through them from this point forward. Patricia sounded relieved. That makes much more sense. We typically work with venue managers rather than dealing directly with property owners. I will update our contract accordingly. Similar calls to the florist rental company, photographer, and other vendors established the new chain of command for the event. None seemed particularly surprised. In fact, most expressed relief that a professional management company would be handling the logistics. Next, I contacted a security company I had worked with for high-end open houses, arranging for 2 staff members to be present throughout the wedding weekend. Their role would be to enforce the terms of the contract, ensure that only authorized vendors and guests access specific areas of my property, and prevent any potential issues from escalating. I also booked myself a room at the Cliffside Hotel, a luxury property about 20 miles down the coast, for the entire wedding weekend. While the contract with Coastal Premier specifically restricted access to my personal bedroom and office, I had no desire to be on site during the event dealing with family members who would inevitably try to negotiate or circumvent the new arrangements. With these logistics in place, I asked Martha to prepare a detailed information packet for the wedding party, including the contract fee structure, property rules, required insurance information, and vendor coordination details. Everything was presented as it would be to any client booking my property as a wedding venue, with no special family concessions or discounts. "When would you like us to present this to the wedding party?" Martha asked, as we finalized the arrangements. I considered the timing carefully. 2 days before the wedding, I decided. Early enough that they can still make other arrangements if they choose to, but late enough that it will be clear this is not up for negotiation or family discussion. "That is cutting it rather close," Martha observed with a slight frown. "Most venues would require contracts and deposits months in advance." "I understand," I acknowledged, "but I need to make a point here. They planned this entire event without consulting me until invitations were already sent. I am actually being more accommodating than most venue owners would be with such short notice." As I left Martha's office, I felt a complex mix of emotions, anxiety about the coming confrontation, but also a sense of empowerment I had rarely experienced in my family relationships. For once, I was not accommodating unreasonable expectations or sacrificing my own boundaries to keep the peace. I was treating my property as what it was, mine, not ours. Back at home, I spent the evening preparing my house for potential rental, securing valuable items in my office safe, and organizing personal belongings that would need to be stored away during the event. I also set up additional security cameras covering the exterior of the property and entry points, with feeds I could monitor remotely during the wedding weekend. As I worked, I drafted and redrafted the email that would be sent to my family explaining the new arrangements. The tone needed to be professional and firm, without the emotional language that would invite debate or guilt trips. This was a business decision about my property, not a family negotiation. That night, I slept better than I had since discovering the wedding invitations. My path forward was clear, and while I knew there would be significant family fallout, I also knew I was standing up for myself in a way that was long overdue. The next morning, I confirmed the final details with Martha and approved the information packet for the wedding party. All that remained was to wait for the right moment to set my plan in motion and finally establish once and for all who truly owned the family beach house. 2 days before the wedding, at precisely 9 a.m., I sent the email I had carefully crafted to Diana, Robert, Madeline, Tyler, and Tyler's parents, with Martha from Coastal Premier Properties copied. The subject line read, "Formal rental agreement for property use on August 19th through 21st. Dear family," it began. "As you know, the plans for Madeline and Tyler's wedding involve the use of my private residence and property. While I was not consulted before invitations were sent, listing my address as the venue I have arranged for my home to be professionally managed as an event venue for the weekend through Coastal Premier Properties. The email continued with clear business-like language. Attached, please find the formal rental agreement, which includes the standard rate for a property of this caliber during peak season, along with the required security deposit insurance. Requirements and property usage guidelines. Martha Wilson will be your point of contact for all logistical arrangements, and her staff will be on site throughout the weekend to ensure everything runs smoothly. I concluded with, please note that this is not a negotiable family arrangement, but rather the only option for using my property as your wedding venue. The contract must be signed and the initial payment processed by 5 p.m. today to secure the venue. I wish Madeline and Tyler all the happiness in their marriage and hope their special day is everything they have dreamed of. Within minutes of sending the email, my phone began ringing. I had anticipated this reaction and had already decided not to answer any calls from family members. This needed to be a business transaction, not an emotional family debate. Instead, I texted Diana. I see you are calling. Please direct all questions regarding the property rental to Martha at Coastal Premier Properties. Her contact information is in the email. Similar texts went to other family members who attempted to call. By mid-morning, my voicemail was full of increasingly agitated messages ranging from Diana's cold fury to Madeline's tearful pleas to my mother's disappointed sighs. At 11:30, Martha called. Well, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. I have been fielding calls from your family all morning. Your Aunt Diana is quite persistent. What are they saying? I asked, bracing myself. Your aunt insists there must be some mistake, that this is a family property and there should be no rental fee. Your cousin is alternating between tears and offers to discuss a reduced family rate, and a gentleman who identified himself as Tyler's father has been asking very practical questions about the contract terms. I took a deep breath. And what have you told them? Exactly what we agreed upon. That this is a business arrangement for the use of a private residence as a wedding venue, and the terms are standard for a property of this caliber. I explained that you have been extraordinarily accommodating given the lack of proper advance booking, and that most venues would require deposits and contracts months in advance. Around 1 p.m., I received a text from Tyler's father, a businessman I had met only once at Madeline's birthday party. Hilda, this is James Brooks. I understand your position and respect your decision. Could we discuss the contract specifics? I am prepared to handle the financial arrangements to ensure Madeline and Tyler's day proceeds as planned. This was the first reasonable response I had received, and I appreciated his businesslike approach. I forwarded his contact information to Martha with a note that she was authorized to work directly with him on the details. By 3 p.m., Martha called with an update. Mr. Brooks has reviewed the contract, requested a few minor modifications regarding vendor access times, and is prepared to sign and submit payment. He has also arranged for the required event insurance. I felt a surprising rush of relief. Despite the family drama, the wedding would proceed, but on terms that clearly established my ownership of the property. That is excellent news, I told Martha. Please proceed with the arrangements. At 4:30 p.m., Martha sent confirmation that the contract had been signed and payment processed. Attached was a note from James Brooks. Hilda, while I wish the circumstances were different, I understand your position. The property will be treated with the utmost respect, and I hope this arrangement allows for healing in the family going forward. His message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Here was someone who understood boundaries and respected my position, even while stepping in to solve the problem for his son and future daughter-in-law. The day before the wedding, I packed a small suitcase and prepared to leave for my hotel. Martha's team had already arrived to begin preparations, establishing clear zones for the event and securing areas that were off-limits. The security team had been briefed, and cameras were functioning properly for remote monitoring. As I was loading my car, Diana's SUV screeched into my driveway. I had been expecting this confrontation and steeled myself as she approached, her face tight with anger. I cannot believe you are doing this, she hissed, barely waiting until she was within earshot. Charging your own family to use this house. We have supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay us. I maintained a calm demeanor. Diana, the arrangements have been finalized with Tyler's father. This is not up for discussion. This is about more than money, she continued, her voice rising. This is about your selfishness, your inability to be generous with your success. That house should be shared with the family that helped you achieve everything you have. For a moment, I considered engaging with her revisionist history, pointing out that I had received minimal support from her throughout my career. Instead, I simply stated, "This is my property purchased with my money maintained with my resources. I am allowing its use under professional management, which is more than generous given that no one consulted me before sending out invitations." "You will regret this," Diana said, her voice low. "Family remembers these things." "Yes," I agreed quietly. Family does remember. It remembers when boundaries are respected and when they are not. Without waiting for her response, I got into my car and drove away, watching her diminishing figure in my rearview mirror. At the Cliffside Hotel, I checked into my ocean view suite and tried to relax. The staff at Coastal Premier would handle everything, and I had made it clear I did not want to be contacted unless there was a serious issue with the property. Still, I found myself checking the security camera feeds periodically throughout the evening. I watched as vendors arrived, setting up tents on the lawn and arranging chairs on the beach. I observed the wedding party touring the property with Martha, who gestured professionally as she presumably explained the rules and boundaries. Even through the soundless feed, I could see Diana's stiff posture and Madeline's subdued demeanor. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, with just enough breeze to keep the August heat at bay. From my hotel balcony, I could see far up the coast, though not quite far enough to glimpse my own property. Throughout the day, I received brief professional updates from Martha, confirming that everything was proceeding according to plan. Ceremony setup complete. All vendors operating within guidelines. Security reports no issues. Later, ceremony concluded successfully. Reception underway. Property boundaries being respected. As evening fell, I found myself experiencing unexpected emotions. There was satisfaction in having stood my ground, but also a tinge of sadness that family relationships had deteriorated to this point. I wondered if bridges could ever be rebuilt, or if this event had permanently altered my place within the family structure. Shortly before midnight, Martha sent a final update, event concluding on schedule. Guests departing via arranged transportation. Minor issues with tent placement resolved quickly. Security reports no property concerns. I sent back a simple thank you and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring the next phase of my plan, returning to reclaim my space and assess the family fallout. I returned to my beach house the day after the wedding, bracing myself for potential damage or signs of disrespect. To my surprise, Martha and her team had already overseen most of the cleanup, and the property looked remarkably well maintained. A few chair indentations on the lawn and some scattered rose petals on the beach were the only visible evidence that a major event had taken place. The wedding party and vendors were extremely cooperative, Martha informed me during our walkthrough. Mr. Brooks personally ensured that everything was handled according to the contract, and he took a hands-on approach to supervising the cleanup. In my mailbox, I found a cream-colored envelope containing a check for the full security deposit, along with a handwritten note from James and Elizabeth Brooks Tyler's parents. "Dear Hilda," it read, "thank you for allowing us to celebrate Tyler and Madeline's union at your beautiful home. While the circumstances were not ideal, we appreciate your willingness to find a solution that allowed the wedding to proceed. Your property was treated with the utmost respect, and we hope this experience can be the beginning of better understanding between all parties involved. Warmly, James and Elizabeth Brooks." Their gracious note was unexpected and touched me deeply. Here were people who understood the importance of boundaries and respect, even in the midst of a family conflict that was not of their making. Later that afternoon, as I was restoring my personal items to their proper places throughout the house, I was surprised by a knock at the door. I opened it to find Madeline standing alone on my porch, looking uncharacteristically subdued in jeans and a simple blouse, a stark contrast to the bridal finery she had worn the day before. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded, stepping back to allow her inside. We sat at my kitchen table, the ocean visible through the window's waves rolling gently onto the shore. "I owe you an apology," Madeline began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I let Mom convince me that using your house without really asking was okay because we are family. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to go along with it than to stand up to her. Her honesty surprised me. "Why did you not just ask me directly?" Madeline looked down at her hands. "I was afraid you would say no, and Mom kept saying she would handle it, that it was basically a family house anyway." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "But it is not. It is yours. You worked for it when nobody else in the family even believed it was possible." I felt a knot of tension I had been carrying for weeks begin to loosen. "Thank you for acknowledging that." "The wedding was beautiful," she continued. "Everything I could have dreamed of, and Tyler's parents were amazing about handling the contract and fees. But I wish we had done it the right way from the beginning, with your blessing rather than your accommodation." We talked for nearly an hour, honestly addressing the boundary violations and family dynamics that had led to the situation. By the time she left, promising to have a long overdue conversation with Diana about respect and boundaries, I felt a glimmer of hope that at least one family relationship might be salvageable from the wreckage. Not everyone was as receptive as Madeline, of course. Diana maintained a frigid silence for months, and several other family members took sides, leading to tense holiday gatherings and divided loyalties. My mother, caught between her daughter and her sister, tried desperately to mediate, but ultimately acknowledged that boundaries had been severely overstepped. "I should have stood up for you from the beginning," she admitted, during a quiet lunch at my house 3 months after the wedding. "Diana has always had a way of steamrolling over people to get what she wants, and I have enabled it for years." Surprisingly, some family members who had initially criticized my stance reached out privately to express support. "I wish I had your courage," my cousin Beth told me during a phone call. "They did the same thing to me with my lake cabin last summer, just showing up with a family reunion planned. I gave in because I did not want the conflict, but I resented it for months." About 6 months after the wedding, Diana finally broke her silence with a stiff email. "While I still believe family should share resources more generously than you chose to, I recognize that the property is legally yours, and we should have requested permission before making plans. Madeline and Tyler are happy, which is what matters most." It was not exactly a heartfelt apology, but from Diana it was significant progress. The wedding incident led me to establish clear formal policies regarding family use of my beach house. I created a simple online calendar where relatives could request specific dates with the understanding that all visits needed explicit approval. I also hosted scheduled family gatherings on my own terms, making it clear when the invitation was extended and for how long. Surprisingly, once these boundaries were firmly established, I found myself more willing to share my space. The resentment that had been building from constant boundary violations diminished, replaced by the genuine pleasure of hosting loved ones in a context of mutual respect. The most unexpected outcome was a new business opportunity. Martha, impressed by my property and our successful handling of the wedding situation, proposed a limited partnership. "Your beach house is exactly the type of exclusive property our high-end clients seek for special events. Would you consider making it available for selected rental opportunities during weeks you are not in residence?" After careful consideration, I agreed to a limited number of rentals each year, with strict guidelines and professional management. The additional income was welcome, but more importantly, I appreciated the validation that my beach house was indeed a valuable asset worthy of respect, not a family community resource to be used at will. My friendship with Jessica deepened through the experience, as she had been my unwavering support throughout the ordeal. We began a tradition of boundary celebration weekends at my beach house, where we would invite friends who understood the importance of personal space and mutual respect. During one such gathering, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset over the Atlantic, Jessica raised her wine glass in a toast to owning your space both literally and figuratively. And to the people who respect it, I added, clinking my glass against hers. The beach house remains my sanctuary, my achievement, my piece of the dream I refuse to abandon despite all discouragement. The journey to protect it taught me that true ownership is not just about having your name on a deed, but about establishing and maintaining the boundaries that define what is truly yours. In the end, the wedding that was planned without my permission became the catalyst for a profound personal transformation. I learned that standing firm in the face of entitlement is not selfishness, but self-respect, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to teach them about boundaries, even when that lesson comes with a price tag they did not expect. Have you ever had family members or friends feel entitled to your space or possessions? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, setting boundaries is not being selfish. It is being honest about what you need to feel respected. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to protect what is yours.